And I, too, use my Google map every time I go somewhere. But to think that somebody should freely be able to turn that over without a warrant. Now, the warrant may be, here's where we're narrowing it, here's why it's important. Someone's life, someone's something, but not just a fishing expedition as far as, in my humble opinion.
Well, and the United States Supreme Court justices
There we
think
go.
alike.
Well, and I, to be honest with you, didn't realize that Google or anybody was turning that kind of stuff over.
Legal chaos.
Legal chaos.
Legal chaos.
Legal chaos.
Legal
Chaos.
Legal.
Legal
Chaos.
chaos.
It's legal chaos.
And we're back here with episode 017. Nick, not every lawyer, especially you and I, has seen the justice system from every different angle. We have a special guest today, Nick. The special guest has seen this justice system of every angle. Peggy Quinn is on the show. Judge Quinn is on the show today, and she's been, well, I didn't know this, but an Air Force contractor. She's been a federal U.S. attorney for 24 years. She's been a magistrate. She's been an elected judge for 12 years. She's now retired, but she's still working. I still see her out in the courthouse. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on what really happens inside the courtroom. Legal Chaos welcomes our special guest, Judge Margaret Peggy Quinn. Welcome to the show.
Thank
Welcome,
you so
Peggy.
much. I am truly honored.
It really is incredible, the journey that you've been on. It really is, to show the magnitude of not only the public services you provided, but just the different dynamics. I failed to mention that for a brief moment in your career, you were also a pro bono criminal defense lawyer. With that being said, which job did you find the hardest?
Oh, the hardest?
The hardest.
Or most challenging.
Most challenging.
I think the years as a federal prosecutor.
Okay, and tell us what your perspective on that is.
Best job I ever could have had. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but each one was good, and I always felt lucky to have it when I got it right out of law school for the contract litigation. And I got to travel to different bases, always in the continental United States. I wasn't able to go to Europe with being a new person on it. But it was just a great way to learn kind of the behind the scenes with military contracting and the base personnel. And it was a great job for me. And then I was lucky enough to get an interview with the U.S. Attorney's Office, first in their civil division, which
sounds boring.
Well, it's again something that I wasn't familiar with, like HUD funding, and at the time, I don't know if you remember, but a lot of farms were in trouble because they had been given a lot of money, probably with great intentions, but when those farms would go under, the feds had to foreclose, and it was a tough time. But some of it wasn't too bad. But I always wanted the criminal. I really felt I hit my stride when I got into the criminal prosecution. I liked that a lot.
And you did that for nearly 24 years.
Yeah,
which is impressive.
Yep, it was a good run.
What's the difference that the difference between a federal prosecutor, a United States attorney, and say like a state prosecutor?
The federal has, I would say, a wider jurisdiction. A lot of the laws are the same, and one is not better than the other. It's simply because state prosecutors have a lot of other demands that in many cases the feds wouldn't. Timing sometimes is tough and the volume is tough. In the federal system, you had a lot of help. The agents that I worked with were just top notch. They were wonderful, and you could be a part of an investigation, but not have to go out there and do the dirty work. You could say, I think we have enough for a search warrant. You could talk. You could meet. and you could plan, you had a lot of help, I guess I would say. And the state prosecutors, I think a lot of people are familiar with county prosecutors or city prosecutors.
Yeah.
They do what I would say is the nitty-gritty, day-to-day, keeping everybody safe, protected, because they see a lot.
Yeah.
And they deal with a lot of different people.
They're
I think it's-
reacting.
That's a good way to put
reacting.
it. They are. And we could be, as a federal prosecutor, I think you can, I don't mean pick or choose, but I will
You're
say,
proactive a lot.
you can be, but you have those resources in a state. You're responding to, all kinds of crimes that affect people, robbery, rape, domestic violence, all kinds of things. And I think in our interaction with them, when we would either do joint cases or do you want to take this, do you want to try this, or would your gun laws get them more time, things like that. I didn't meet a county prosecutor that I didn't think was working their tails off. They were wonderful, hardworking people. So the difference is the jurisdiction. If they had a bank robbery in, say, Dayton, and you also had a bank robbery in Troy and Tip and different places, which we did, the feds could, individually, they could each do them, but the feds could do it together. Yeah.
We had our good friend, everybody's good friend, former special agent Dennis Ang on the show.
Yes.
Dennis gave us a little bit of an insight on, the workings of the FBI. And when you mentioned, and Tony was mentioning being proactive, to me it seems like a real team approach. You've got the agencies that you're working with, FBI, DEA, Homeland Security now, different Air Force, and they come to you with ideas or cases and you develop those cases. Explain a little bit kind of that working relationship that you would have with these agents and how the cases would get designed and investigated.
Mm-hmm. For much of the time that I was with the federal system, agents could come to the AUSA that they were comfortable with or that had time or that you had built a rapport with, which is why I ended up working quite a bit with Tom Migrants or a number of other people. And for several years, Ohio was huge. Through the Attorney General, Betty Montgomery. She was very pro task forces for I think there were 7 or 8 of them that we had worked on at different times for problems that hit different counties, and you could then get to know the HHS or FBI, and there was usually FBI was the lead or IRS, but it was a coordination, and it was one of the most interesting things that I participated in. You can have different law enforcement officers, whether it's the local police, the sheriff's department. We even ended up having a witness from St. Louis, a highway patrolman from St. Louis that tied into one of our cases. So it really was a lot of cooperation and a wonderful sense of people working together.
Peggy, give us some insights. So, when agents bring a case to you, right, and you're interested in a case, so you know the law, so you're like, I want to build this case, but when the defense lawyer gets on it, I want to make sure I'm going to overwhelm with all this evidence, so he's not going to think twice about filing a motion or going to trial, right? So these agents are coming to you. Before the case is filed, are you coaching them and saying, look, I need more, go back, go investigate, go do some more? Like, you're able to build your case, right?
Sure, you're able to be a part of it, and that's what I think I like the most. I originally, when I was much younger, thought I wanted to be part of law enforcement.
Yeah.
My sister and I, the one that did go to the FBI, and I both got packets back then to actually apply as an agent. But I realized quite quickly I didn't have that part of. I love to read about it. I love to look over the cases, but I didn't have the courage, the inner fortitude to to confront somebody like that, or to go in or stop a car or be on. I knew that wasn't going to be my forte. So I liked the part about analyzing what they did. But in any situation where I was ever involved, the people that we dealt with, the agents, were highly professional. I know people hear horror stories.
Not all of them, right?
Not all of them. You're right. The ones I loved and wanted to work with, yes, very professional.
But you get to build your.
You do. You get to tell them you're right.
You get to go. Have there have been situations, and I'm sure there has, because you want to build the strongest case you can. I think
Sure.
for those that we've talked about this before, federal cases and state cases. A lot of times, state cases, something happens or bank robbery, they're collecting as much information, a suspect, and evidence as they can at that moment,
Sure.
and quickly try to put it together, and they got to commit
Yeah.
to the narrative pretty early. Whereas federal cases, federal prosecutors, these agents present them with certain information, and you get to say,
I want more.
I
Could we
need
do
more.
this? Could we do? Yes.
So you've got like this blueprint, right? You get to
Right.
put the blueprint
Right.
together.
Right. And you all make it also, I think, gave you, that's the luxury, I think, that maybe the
Yeah.
federal system has that state prosecutors don't. So it's not that one is better or more important. It's that it's a different timing, a different skill set on the cases that are presented, and different reasons for presenting them. So there could be cases that could be prosecuted at the state level,
Yeah.
or at the federal level, or both. But what's your biggest bang for your buck? And that was often done, making those kind of decisions.
And so in state court, a lot of the stuff that we ask for, like through the rules of discovery, they a lot of times they give us everything we need. I mean, that's what the rules are. And where you practice at the Southern District of Ohio was pretty good about sharing information. But Nick and I have talked to other lawyers in other jurisdictions. Sometimes, for whatever reason, and I don't know what the reason why they would hold it, but they don't share a whole lot of information.
In other jurisdictions. Well, and give me the understand that I've been retired for a while now, but when we were there were certain things that you maybe wouldn't, witnesses that you knew might be talked to or intimidated,
the proffers, right?
Sure. But there were other things that aren't going to change. Bank records, income tax returns that we would have to get special permission to get, but things that you could get that really just, I forget what the statistic was, but there's a huge percentage of cases that are negotiated and pled ahead of time.
Yeah.
And to do that, a good defense attorney.
Don't look at me when you say that.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, which I never was. A good defense attorney will know that. And so it's kind of it isn't, to my way of thinking, it's not like you might see on a segment of Law and Order or something where people are yelling at each other and coming in and I'll see you in court. But it is nice to sit down and actually have a conference. We're calling you in. We'll show you what we have. We would do that, and I'm trying to remember the name of the lawyer. We knew. He was local. You guys would know him. It may come to be at the end. But he goes, I got one of your letters. I thought I was
Target letter.
Yeah, but I can't remember the lawyer. He goes, I thought I was being asked to come to tea. We said, here, we'll talk with you. We'll show you.
My God.
It's I hate to say more civilized. I think time and manpower gives you the ability to do things that you probably wouldn't be able to do at the state level. Otherwise, you'd drown in the cases.
Yeah.
And I liked that part of it. I think that may have been one of the things I liked the most about the job. Here's what we have. What else? What is it that's sticking with your? And some would never settle. Would never agree.
Sure.
But most of the time, there was room to work it out.
One of the things is so interesting. We don't think about it now, and I don't want to. You did this for a long time. When you came in as a U.S. attorney, think about what we didn't have.
Oh,
We didn't have cameras. We didn't have cell phones.
Oh, body cam.
We didn't have body cam.
We didn't.
Recorded
our
interviews
office
a
was-
lot of times.
They were
we
not
didn't-
computerized.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, people
And-
had. Do you remember Bob Balin in Cincinnati? He was primarily a civil attorney, but very good. And he brought his home computer in, which now they, but
Well, that's-
but the office was not. Things were written on legal. Yeah. So much has changed. So much has changed.
But these guys, these agents and you are putting together cases differently then than we are now.
Oh, sure.
Now we've got flock cameras. We know where everybody is. We've got body cameras. We can see exactly what the interaction is. They're now putting up, high definition cameras on poles, gathering evidence.
Right here. I forget
Our cell phones.
information on our cell phones.
Geofence warrants.
Geofence warrants.
And you guys
Unconstitutional.
had what you had, and you were able to put together bigger cases. And I think that's remarkable. But also, I think that what's also remarkable, and I think is a necessary thing, different than when Tony was talking about being reactive with the state prosecutors, you're able to go after bigger fish. I've always had this saying where, hey, by the way, if you're out on the corner selling marijuana and the local police grab you, they're going to arrest you and charge you with marijuana. The difference with the feds is they aren't going to arrest you. They're going to watch you, and they're going to come back the next day. Then they're going to follow you. They're going to find out where you live. They're going to find out who you talk to. They're going to set up this. They're going to set up that, and they're going to gather that. So when you hear that knock on the door and it's the FBI, you're in trouble.
No. Yeah. Well, and those persons, yes, because we go back to the resources again, and I would hope we didn't, at least when I was there, marijuana was not the big deal.
Right.
Yeah, that was it. That's changed a whole lot. You could do a whole nother show on that, I guess. It was more heroin, cocaine,
Crack. Yeah.
Crack was the
Crack,
big,
yeah, that was it.
where they just the sentencing.
I remember they changed
Sure.
the laws. Yeah.
Yes, they did. Yeah, and that was.
So during your tenure as a AUSA, when you first started, it was. Did we talk about it? Was President Carter? No, it was Reagan.
No, it was
Reagan.
Yeah.
So you worked through a few tenures of different administrations, which
November
almost
of '83.
changes the policy, like the office policy, right?
Well,
Has there been kind of a change where, hey, we've got this new administration, we want to focus on gun laws, we want
Sure.
to focus on drug cases, we want agents to go and be proactive on these cases, and then you have to create a blueprint to try to, when the agents come in, to prosecute those cases?
Well, I think that it may not be as rich as all that. I remember there were letters, from Justice, and this will be our concentration, or we're going to move now towards. But I think a lot of that was from a broad group of people in
Gotcha.
charge, in power, that were setting the stage for that. Forfeitures were another thing that when I first started there were not big at all,
Yeah.
and then became very
I
big.
remember, yeah.
The gun laws,
Yeah.
for a while I was the gun person. They changed. It was hard to keep up with what
Yeah.
was happening. But I think there's always this is where we want to concentrate, and I don't think that's bad. I think it just kind of is a slow-moving ship that changes course by what the elected and appointed people think is important now. And marijuana was not considered a. I mean, I'm not saying they never did it, but it would be big quantities,
Yeah.
interstate, things like that. I think it was mostly the heroin, crack, cocaine, things like that at the time I was doing it.
When you and I we had a number of cases together, and one of the things that I remember about your tenure, and it wasn't just your tenure, but it was at least during that period of time, we would see a lot of multi-defendant conspiracy cases.
Sure.
18, 20, 22 people.
Yeah.
We had a couple, if you remember, the case that you were involved in, the Bruce Young case. What was significant? Bruce Young was a it was a drug conspiracy case, and it had a bunch of other stuff involved, and I think violence and things like that. But that investigation, how did that transpire, and how did that case play itself out?
If memory serves me, that case was a second indictment, not a superseding, but a second indictment that spun from what they called the Jack Clark, Danny Nixon. They were the two bigger, the first defendants, the first and second defendants. So it's a lot of, you mentioned, Tony, about how they're investigated. Who can you prove the case? What do you have? Jim Wilson used to go down every line of your indictment and say, how are you going to prove this? How are you going to prove that date, Peggy? How are you going? It was a wonderful way to learn. It kind of got you a little at the beginning, but it was a great way to learn. So everything you were going to do and how you ranked those defendants was a process with the agents, not so much me telling them, because they're very talented and very sharp, and they're in the field. They know who's doing what. But it was also designed for people who weren't as culpable, people who weren't making the decisions or planning the trips or buying the properties. They were involved, but with an idea of perhaps they would want to be given. The deal sounds terrible, but that's pretty much what. Do you want to cooperate and work? So you would work from the bottom up and then try and work out what was fair for each person. And sometimes you were left with just the top three, which in that case we were. I believe Bruce Young was a follow-on indictment of another 12 people or something like that.
Those cases, and the reason I brought that up when we talked about how the feds can build these cases and really go out and do things, you've got in the community, I guess, with these folks, you could say if it was a local prosecutor, hey, by the way, we think this guy's involved in a felonious assault, or we think this guy, and they can go out and prosecute them individually. But I think with the conspiracy cases, they're kind of like jigsaw puzzles, and you've got big pieces and smaller pieces. And you guys had the and I say luxury. I don't mean.
No,
I mean,
I think that's a good word for it.
you have that luxury to go out and say to an FBI Tom Migrants or an IRS agent like Tom Buckenroth and say, hey, we need to go out and do these things. Let's put this together. And yes, you'd have people at the bottom of the conspiracy that might be smaller players, but they were just as important if they could bring additional information. And that's where you would use maybe a proffer or cooperation. How prevalent is that, or was that when you were a U.S. attorney?
Huge.
How does that work?
Mark Parker was a part of, and he had since
IRS.
He was also a individual. They helped.
Oh, Mark.
Mark Parker.
Yeah.
You're
Not
thinking of
the
agent.
Not
no,
the agent.
there was
Mark
an agent
Parker.
But Mark Parker was really, as Tom Migrant said, he was a guy trying to feed his family, and unfortunately he was doing it by being involved with Jack Clark, Danny Nixon, people like that. But I have since seen him in a normal capacity, and he's things can work out, I guess, is what I'm saying.
He got rehabilitated. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. That's right. And I
People
saw
can
him
get
in
rehabilitated.
I believe that firmly.
There you go.
But when you rank people and you work things out, you're giving me a lot of credit that I think really it was the agents who brought these cases and wanted to keep working them and saying, here's what we've got, because they wanted it to appeal to the AUSA. But
I would say a couple things, and one, I would like to note this. So when I first, and I told you the story beforehand, three of us are in a room now in a podcast, but I remember I was a young lawyer, 2005, and I was trying to learn federal cases, and Nick had a federal case that he was appointed on. I said, hey, look, let me tag along. And I remember went over to the U.S. Attorney's office, and this was your case, and I think it was another U.S. attorney that was involved in it. We proffered.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand the concept. I'm like, why are we here? I'm like,
why are we talking?
Why are we talking? Like
Yeah.
the case is not over. And I remember, and I remember you getting a little frustrated with our client because a lot of times these proffer, they want to try to minimize, right? They're trying to like,
Sure.
I didn't know anything.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
I mean, like hour number 3, we finally
Human nature.
finally
Yeah.
broke through. And,
Yeah.
but that was my first experience, and kind of full circle. Now we're here and it's 20 years later and we're talking about,
It was a great tool, but it was also a good chance. I understand why it would be hard for somebody to come in and tell you.
Of course.
But what they told you there that you didn't already know, part of the deal was couldn't be used. So it couldn't get any worse
What is
than
it
what
called?
we thought.
King for a day or queen
Well,
for a day? Is that? I mean,
I'm
that's
sure it had a lot of those.
that you
Yeah.
get, you get a
It's
little,
exactly
get
what.
the
Yeah.
deal.
you get a letter. And
You
say,
guys,
hey, we're not gonna.
that was
proffer letter?
That was a target letter. Do you want to come in and talk to us because here's what we're looking at you for?
Here's can I say I've always been frustrated about, and I get it that the federal government, they work cases, and I understand everybody's got a role in our judicial system, but was always frustrated in the magnitude of these superseding indictments, and then indicting somebody that's number 15 on the list who everybody knows in the room. They don't have a leadership role. They may have showed up or given somebody a ride, but the government still chooses to indict a person like that versus saying, look, you're just going to be a witness. We'll call you as a witness. We know you were there a couple of times. Like, why indict past 10? Why indict past 5? Like, we know the major players are the ones that are going out there, and they're the ones that are making the money because they're the ones that ultimately hire a lawyer. And I mean,
That's a whole nother.
It's another thing, but you
podcast,
know what
yeah.
I'm trying to say.
I do.
Why indict after 5? Why, isn't it overkill for the government to say?
No.
Right? No?
Especially with some of the
And
bigger.
that's coming from a defense lawyer point of view.
Well,
Not
you know what?
to
It
say-
doesn't work unless everybody's in there doing their job. So I just couldn't. I couldn't do what you do.
And we're
That's
gonna
the
talk
truth.
about that.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about that.
But you ask why? Why were there 17 or 18 on
Right.
some of them? Because each person has a part to play in what it is you need to prove in that conspiracy. Did they manage this many people? What was their role? Did in the one? Well, why did you indict his old aunt? Well, because she was an integral part. That when they didn't have cell phones, in keeping them together, the communications. Oh, you're in Florida. Oh, you're dealing with him. Oh, she was a big player. Mike Monta was her
Mike
attorney.
Monta, yeah.
Wonderful man.
I
wonderful
remember,
man.
of course,
And
of course.
and ultimately, it should look why you do it. I couldn't agree with you more, though. To supersede downward, they call it, to include. Let's go do another indictment. We're going to indict these.
Right.
Wasn't the way it was during the time that I was familiar with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I can't speak about that, recently. But that wasn't what you did. You did it to include for the conspiracy. And superseding downward is what they call it. Never made sense. You don't usually do that.
Well, the state courts, they don't have that luxury. It's
Sure.
only in federal system. I mean, do you think now, kind of looking back on it, that maybe the federal government has too much power on that when it comes to having the ability to say, in the middle of a case, I want to continue to add to the puzzle?
No, I think any prosecutor has a lot of power.
Okay.
And I think most of the ones that I know and dealt with, most of them now are retired, but most of the ones that I've ever dealt with want nothing more than to do the right thing and
Sure.
to do a good job. And people may be skeptical about that or cynical, but it's just, I think you have to ask yourself, you really do represent the people. And I think if more people do think that way, I just don't think it gets a lot of press. And it may also be hard for people to understand why. I had one defendant's mother who just kept telling me, she goes, he ain't all bad. He ain't all bad. And it really touched my heart. And I said, I know very few people are all bad or all good.
Amen to that. That's very true. That's very true.
So what's fair? And what's fair for me, what's fair, thank God I wasn't Judge Rice or Judge Rose or Judge Mers, because all I had to do was
But you're Judge
put it
Quinn.
up there.
You're Judge
well,
Quinn.
in
You-
Muni Court, now that's a whole different thing, and that was another lucky thing that that came to me, and I truly feel grateful for that. That's totally different than what I did before.
Why can't you be a defense lawyer? What you said you did it and you couldn't do it. What-
Yeah, I don't mean it like, oh, how do you defend
No,
people
I didn't-
that are
I-
guilty?
and I didn't take it
Yeah,
that way.
I
I didn't
mean
take it that way.
I didn't have that skill set. It is a huge skill set and very different from prosecuting. I know a lot of prosecutors left and open, but that wasn't one I had. When I did retire, I did some volunteer stuff with the Montgomery County Public Defenders, and what a great way, at least for me, to see. I mean, how hard they work, how much they care.
Yeah.
I couldn't make people listen to me. I kind of dogged Christine Communal, who's another wonderful
Yeah.
person.
Oh,
Her
yeah.
cases,
Yeah.
and took a few.
Yeah.
I was overwhelmed
Well-
with the volume and what happened and how you had to do it. And people look at me and go, I want to talk to her. It's definitely a skill set to represent them, to know the law, to be able to know how far your prosecutor is going to push it, even for good reasons. And I think it was one that I found out quickly I did not have.
Yeah,
So,
just as you were mentioning the prosecutors at the state level, the county prosecutors really being reactive. Public defenders are, it's like a shotgun that's one after the
we
another
are
and after
so, and I feel this, and I got to know it more. Now, the federal public defenders were
Sure,
wonderful
of
too
course.
that I dealt with, but the county, Montgomery County, is very lucky. I'm not as familiar with other counties, but oh my gosh, I've seen them, and that was the beauty of municipal court. I got to see them come in, and they knew their cases, and they'd have them stacked up, and they were, by and large, just excellent, hardworking people that wanted nothing more than to help people who were not at the best chapter of their life. That part to me was one of the best things I did after retirement, and then in municipal court.
You know, Tony and I, when the federal work that we do, generally speaking, and I would say majority of the federal work that we do now are drug cases, aren't they, Tony? They're drug conspiracy cases.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, we were talking a few moments ago early on in my career. I remember doing bank robberies. Like nobody,
Yeah.
it's not a funny joke, but
Because- yeah.
nobody's robbing banks anymore.
No, and you're right. Well, and if they are, there's probably a few, but it's
right.
not the priority like that. The real crime is the higher crime. The housing fraud, the mortgage
Yeah.
frauds when
The
I
white
was still
collar
there,
stuff.
the white collar stuff.
Yeah.
Where this is my impression. I don't have a statistic for you, but it seems like a lot of the people that go to jail are the mid-level bank managers, the mid-level. Very, very few of the biggest offenders in banking fraud, I think, actually serve
Are you
time.
suggesting that financial crimes? Are you suggesting that you would, in your scale of in your mind, the litmus of more severe to non-severe? Are you suggesting financial crimes in your mind are heavier type of criminal offenses than and allegations than drug cases?
Yes, I think they affect a lot of people. Drugs do too. I'm not
course.
trying to make it.
Of course.
But I think financial crimes can really cripple
Right.
a city.
Devastating.
Yes, investors.
Like we know the biggest, like the Ponzi schemes type of those
Sure.
those are
Sure, or even the banks themselves doing things
Sure.
where they don't.
Right.
If you're fined and nobody goes to jail, to my way of thinking,
Yeah.
it must have made money for you because you accepted that fine.
Right.
I'm definitely not an expert anymore, but to me, I think those may not be as sexy as a drug case, supposedly.
Right.
But they're a lot harder to prove, and that's why you need the IRS, the FBI. You need people that really want to dig into those, and it takes time.
I asked Dennis Ang what a second story guy was.
Yeah.
What is a second story guy?
You tell me.
He's the guy that puts the ladder up against the house and he breaks in and he steals your stuff, right?
Okay.
These guys that you were prosecuting, the Bruce Young, the Clark, Nixon, these guys, these were big conspiracy cases.
Yeah.
But But really what they were is they were pockets of the city that were really kind of organized crime as we would see here
Sure.
in this community.
Sure.
And you were prosecuting those cases. And I can tell you, I remember being back in that time period, and a lot of the other cases that I had were those types of cases, whether it was counterfeiting of videotapes or audio tapes,
yeah.
or these types of cases that were
Yeah.
not just drugs, but they were enforcing, they were taking money, they were extorting money.
Yeah, it wasn't.
You
that-
had criminals.
Sure.
And I wonder now how you would enjoy the work as a U.S. attorney, because a lot of that is no longer the priority, or at least it's all drugs. It really is a lot, at least here.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, but I will tell you why the drug cases that we did take, both from the agent's perspective and as an AUSA, there was a lot of that intimidation. In the Clark case, it was primarily the east side of Dayton, where, I mean, to the point of, as I perhaps mentioned, the violence, chaining people, beating people, shooting people,
Yeah.
killing, the violence, and it really did intimidate, I think, that whole neighborhood. You don't sell here, it was like a gang.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to make them seem bigger than they were, but that was the emphasis back then. I think a lot of the task force type cases that were approved by then Attorney General Betty Montgomery, and I'm sure there were others. That's the one that
Right.
kept them coming like rapid fire. It was just a good way to do what you were talking about, to incorporate local law enforcement with the feds who maybe had a bigger reach, and be able to make sense of these conspiracies, because it didn't stop at the East End and brutalizing people there. It went down to Kentucky, where it went down to Florida, it went to Louisiana. So to say just drugs, I think if we really chose as a nation to do something about drugs, my humble opinion as an old person now is that we could probably do a lot better. But you got to start somewhere. And maybe that's true for every kind of crime. But it isn't the only thing. And just because people don't see maybe how it affects their day-to-day life with a mortgage fraud type case, or a bank fraud type case, or an insurance fraud, doesn't mean it's not important.
You know, Peggy, among the other advantages that the government has against defense lawyers and defendants sometimes, one of the bigger advantages is the law itself. And for me, and I think Nick may agree, when we start looking at the statutory guidelines, and the first thing the two words that worry me when I tell my client is mandatory minimum.
Sure.
And when we talk about that, just kind of for our listeners, when the federal statute says there's a mandatory minimum of 10 years to life, that means that the judge, unless there's a 5K or Rule 16 agreement where the parties agree to go below the minimum, again, and that really is a discretion of the AUSA, the prosecutor, to work through things. But when there's a mandatory minimum, that means a defendant has to get that. Do you still think, now that you've done this for, I mean, you've got to, again, we're seeing the lens through an individual that's been through 4 different areas of our justice system. Every aspect of it. You're looking at this thing, and one of the things you talk about, we do better in drug cases. The mandatory minimums typically apply to drug cases and conspiracy charges. Do you still think that mandatory minimum language is necessary, or is that something that we need to change? That's a loaded question.
It's a deep question. I think this is where a good defense attorney and a prosecutor sitting down and looking at the overall, I'm not saying they didn't happen, but they are meant to be a heavy hammer.
It is a heavy hammer.
It's a very tough one. But when you think, when you think of the levels, I don't think it should be just because they make a bare minimum of a drug amount. One of my favorite lines over the last several years, or quotes, is "Hope springs eternal." And as Judge Rice said one time, Peg, if they're going to mess up, they'll have plenty of opportunity to think about it in jail. But for right now,
jeez.
no, that's what he meant. He goes, right now, I am going to take this chance and give him a chance. And it made infinite sense. It's a line that I, as a prosecutor, remember. Not everybody's all bad. I think you'll always find people who think, I'm going to hammer them. If you had to go to different counties, which I know you do, it varies from county to county.
But do you think a mandatory minimum gives an unfair advantage?
To a prosecutor.
Or in other words, is it an unfair disadvantage to a defendant because you're really working against the mandatory minimum, and then without even looking at the aspects of what are potential defenses, the first thing AUSA would reach out and say, here's a mandatory minimum of 10 years. Do you guys want to come in and talk?
Yeah, but let's say it doesn't just get there. I mean, they have to prove that they've met that quantity. They have to prove that this is involved. So it's a big case.
No, I get all that.
Does it give I don't think laws necessarily, when they're enacted, are meant to
Why put the words mandatory minimum? Why not just say, look, the maximum sentence on this based upon this quantity is 15 years. If you go above this quantity, it's potentially up to 20 years. Why say but there's a mandatory that you got to do this year.
I'll tell you why.
Why do they put that in there?
I think it was more just like the sentencing guidelines to get some sort of frame so that in Dayton, Ohio, or Ohio, you may not be, you distribute 20 kilos and people are like, holy hell. But in Louisiana where it's coming in, or in different places, or, off truckloads, that's nothing.
Drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I think, well, in the grand scheme of things, yes. But I think it's to help courts have some sort of uniformity is never going to happen when you have different judges, but something to try and attain. So do I think it's bad? I think it could tie your hands, but also if you're a prosecutor and a defense attorney who want to sit and listen to good arguments, I think that's probably a great way to start. Does it give the prosecutor an extra hammer? Sure. Sure.
I think I agree with Tony, but I add this context. Dealing with you as a defense attorney, I always felt like when I was dealing with you, and there are other prosecutors that I feel the same way about, you would be able to look at a case and you would be able to say, you know what, this guy's a bad guy. This guy needs a longer period of time. But I've got discretion with others,
Sure.
and I'm going to exercise my discretion.
Hence the bigger number on the indictment.
That's right.
Exactly.
But
Sure.
you could always go and say, you know what, I'm going to supersede. I'm going to go down from a 10, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to help. But that means that the prosecutor has to have that discretion. And the people that work with that prosecutor have to give them that discretion when they want to make changes. And we don't always see that. That's the problem when you have, I think, mandatory minimums. Right now, I see prosecutors that do not hold that power and that discretion over their cases. And that's why I think that when I would agree with Tony that the mandatory minimums are thrown there. And even if you feel that it would be the right thing to do later on, or, hey, this person, you know what, I don't have the authority to do it, now we're stuck.
I don't want to give you the impression I could always go, yeah, that's a great thing, and sign off on it. You always had the hierarchy, which really was good, because then it forced me to explain to my supervisor and to the U.S. attorney why this was a good idea. Well, if you thought the mandatory minimums were there, why do you? But in my, it's what I think I might have said in the beginning. That was one of the best parts for me about that job. They would say, what's the Chris Barnes? I said, my boss at the time, the U.S. attorney when I first was hired. What's the right thing to do?
Yeah.
And if you can present a case as to why that was right or why you think it's good now, we did have that. I also think it would be wrong just to, I don't know if jack up a charge is a very
Sure.
nice thing to say, but to
You can-
up
you
the
can call-
charge,
you can call it what it is.
to throw it, that's disingenuous. That's not.
But that happens, though.
I just am sorry to hear that. And I'm not trying to be naive and say
No, I
it
get
doesn't,
it.
but it shouldn't. It should be what you can prove and
You know
what the
what?
facts
I
are.
would feel comfortable if every AUSA was like Peggy Quinn, and I mean that sincerely, because I do feel, and I've remember having cases with you, and then I've practiced in front of you as a judge. There was always a sense of, okay, I'm a lawyer, but I'm in a position of power, but yet I'm going to be balanced. But not unfortunately, people with position of power that have the authority to indict don't have the same mentality as you and again, this is not about every AUSA. There's a lot. This is a great jurisdiction. Nick and I have been lucky to practice in this jurisdiction, and people have said that, and judges have said that. Hey, and we've gone to seminars at the one that you do every year. The public defenders do, and the judges have a panel, and Judge Rose is there and Judge Rice, and they always compliment the defense bar and that this is a good jurisdiction to practice with. But I've heard and talked to lawyers in other jurisdictions that they don't have the same luxury, and it's unfortunate.
That's
There's
sad.
not a universal
Yeah.
mindset of discretion, how to use this, what do we indict, do we over-indict, and there's a mandatory minimum, and how is that used? And that, I think that was my point, not to say that this jurisdiction has done that, but
Right.
I think there's a sense of unfairness to it, in my opinion.
which is awful, really, when you think about it. So maybe the answer is more. I don't know about me, and I know there's discussion all the time.
Yeah.
I don't think they should be abused. But here's the other thing. Maybe truly people, before they appoint people or hire people,
there it is.
should look at again, it sounds so trite or grade schoolish, but should look at the ethics. Are they the person you would want to be judged by? Are they the person that you would trust to prosecute your
That's
loved
right.
one? Are they? And if you can't say yes to that, then you don't deserve the damn job. It was a wonderful job for me, and I mean that.
Yeah.
I loved it, but also I think every day, even now, we're paid, and if you do pro bono work, you're paid by the people.
Yeah.
You're paid by the people you represent.
Yeah.
You're hired by to really get in there and go. But I think we all ought to remember who we're representing.
Oh, Nick and I
So-
used to do many moons ago. We were on that CJA federal panel.
Sure.
We did that.
Sure.
That was hard work.
Sure.
That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of times our clients would be incarcerated because they'd be held without bond, which makes it another stress level that we'd have to go. Again, we never mind go seeing our clients in the jail, but it really is
Yeah.
sometimes.
And there's nothing close, is
There's
there?
nothing close, and
Yeah.
sometimes the jails, they don't make it easy for us. We have to wait for hours, and then
Yeah.
if now in the past 10, 15 years there's electronic discovery, so we have to take a device. Before it was just boxes of paper, which are what I've carried boxes of
Yeah.
discovery
Yeah.
into the jail before, but it's just one element of what we have to go through. And what the defendant has to go through from his point of view is like, I'm already behind the 8 ball, and I can't get out,
Yeah.
and I've got certain amount of time. I can't pick up the phone and talk to my lawyer. And I'm not saying that the system is unfair, but there's some
Sure.
disadvantages, and that they're there
We could
for.
always make it better.
They're there
couldn't
for
we?
a reason, and I understand
Yeah.
people get accused of things, and there's
Yeah.
not to be put up at the Hilton. But in the same token,
You're right. Because in the end, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, people are going to get out.
yeah.
And what do we do
That's true.
after that?
That's true.
Yeah. And that's not the only reason we ought to protect their where they're staying and make it more humane. But Somebody, I wish I remembered things or retained things better, but NPR had a series on about people who were actually talking about improving the conditions and
Yeah.
the education for both federal and state type facilities, because in the end, and it's not a new concept, but how do you do it?
Yeah. Quality
I
of
saw
life. Right?
I saw that, or I've seen studies where they've looked at detention facilities in Europe and different countries where they have people that they treat humanely. In their room, they've got forks and knives
Sure.
and
Which we all know may not work sometimes.
well,
Sure.
but what they would do is the better you behave, the better you, the more freedoms you receive.
Sure, a graded type system, right?
And so the idea, and this is a completely different topic, but the idea, I think, just to summarize, is a prison, incarceration, is to take away your liberty. I can't move about where I
Well,
want.
it's to punish somebody.
Well, it is.
It has a lot of purposes,
But-
does it? Protect society, so to speak. Rehabilitate, but we all know.
Rehabilitation.
Sure.
But and then there used to be, well, we're gonna be down in a different part of the country, and we're gonna make big rocks into little rocks.
Sure.
But you were right; these are individuals that are going to be released, and how we treat people is going to impact, I think, how when they get released, how they're going to be.
And I don't mean to say that it would be easy to run a prison or
Sure.
run a jail or work in them.
Oh, boy.
It must be very tough, and they deserve as much protection. But I think if people really believe that they need more jail time and send them to jail and we'll teach them a lesson, it's not a very accurate view.
Nick mentioned that from the dynamics of discovery and all the technology. And I know we're kind of talking about this case that just came out, and it's kind of exciting how the Supreme Court finally ruled on it. But we talked about geofence warrants, and basically, and I know you didn't realize this until we just talked about it a few moments ago, but that's kind of the phenomenon of how technology has changed our society. So basically, these geofence warrants, though, we all use our GPS.
Yeah.
I mean, I use it every day, and my kids use. My daughter, she won't leave anywhere without putting an
Yeah.
address on
Your apps use it.
yeah, on the Google Maps, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a bank allegation of a bank robbery, and the investigators were able to contact Google and say, give us every user of a cell phone that was in that area. And they did. They provided all this information, and ultimately they looked at patterns like what time was the bank robbery to this individual. It looks like he drove back and forth. We're going to narrow this thing down to about 25 people that seem that were in the area. But again, we talk about how, and you were a judge, and I don't know if you've dealt with approving search warrants, right? People.
Well, I would read them, approve them to be reviewed by the judge. Is
Right.
that what you mean?
When
yeah,
you
as
were
a
the judge.
prosecutor.
When you were the
When
judge.
you're the
Oh.
judge.
When you were the judge.
Yes,
Did you
but
sign
on
search
on a much smaller scale, though.
Right.
Like the federal judges, where you would need, I would assume, for a Google search warrant.
No, what they were doing is ultimately they were getting this information, right? So the defendants on the cases challenged it and said that was a search, and the Supreme Court finally says, yeah, we agree that was a search, and you needed to get a search because it wasn't particular enough.
And you're right. I should be familiar. I'm sorry. That's my bad. I'll go maybe read it tomorrow.
I just think it's an
But
interesting the
it-
way that
it is.
technology has changed.
Well,
It's
sure.
impacting all of us.
And when I was and it is a search. It is their business records. It is
Right.
it is. Yeah, I think that to me that when I was still there, as I recall though, it was difficult. I mean, the big deal was, hey, there's a computer in the house.
Oh boy.
And so sure. So they started writing extra pieces. Why do you think there's info on the computer?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want? That just to me is that's
You think
protection.
You think
I think
that's
it's,
all privacy. You
I
think
think
that's all
it's-
private information.
Yeah, and it's kind of silly anymore. I think maybe silly is a bad word, but to think that people think there's an expectation of privacy in your phone or pictures that are posted or things that you say,
Yeah.
or any of that. I had a chat before with
Brandon.
sorry, Brandon.
Yeah.
I'm old. The name just left me. But with Brandon, about I am woefully ignorant on how a lot of this works. But I sure can go in, and I too use my Google Map every time I go somewhere. But to think that somebody should freely be able to turn that over
Yeah.
without a warrant. Now, the warrant may be, here's where we're narrowing it, here's why it's important. You know, someone's life, someone's something, but not just a fishing expedition as far as, in my humble opinion.
Well,
And
you and the United States Supreme Court
There we
justices
go. There we
think
go.
alike.
Well, and I, to be honest with you, didn't realize that Google or anybody was turning that kind of stuff over.
I was actually a little surprised
Yeah.
because, you know, it seems like, as we mentioned early on, you used to have to fight to get bank
Sure.
records. You had to
Sure.
fight to get
And that's good.
right. Now it's just a strike
go.
of a pen. Nobody thinks about it anymore. And I feel like, and one of the drums we beat around here is kind of the loss of the
Sure.
privacy.
Well, you taught me something. No kidding. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it had gone that far, but
They got that one right, I think.
Well, you know, and we've talked about this. There's any time that you download an app, there's a setting on your phone where you can put whether you want to share your information. I mean, there's so much information on your phone that,
Sure.
that we're really giving up. And if you're giving it up, you're giving it up. You got to stop sharing that information.
But that's the sad part, at least for me. People don't even realize, I'm one of them, how many ways. And finally, by the time you mentioned Google Maps,
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that I want to know where I'm headed, especially if I'm going to sit in a different city. You
Yeah.
know, precisely how do I get to these places?
Let's talk about one more piece of technology which is going to get challenged. There's been lawsuits about this. Flock cameras.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
telling you, it is a hot topic for a lot of different reasons. And what's happening in these private companies, they're creating the technology, and they're selling it to local government agencies. But what's happening, there's not enough regulation. So the flock camera is recording you every time you go over to Starbucks or every time Nick goes over to DLM.
Sure.
And it's recording that. How many times? And that information is getting stored in a database. And then let's say there is some sort of criminal action
Sure.
in that area. It's allowing certain agencies to go in there and start running statistics and running information about Nick's plate and his vehicle going into that.
Sure.
And that's stored information.
But let me ask you this.
Yes.
At least there, you're on a public road. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but
Okay.
to me, that's even different
Sure.
than being able to go in and say, did they make a call in this area from a cell phone? That at least
Okay.
you could make an argument that they thought they had an expectation
Fair
of
enough.
some privacy, maybe. So I just observed, because I knew the prosecutors, on a case in Columbus where the flock camera, it wasn't the only thing, but it certainly helped put this person in the vicinity when he said, despite his DNA being there. So they've been used and they serve a purpose, but I see your point.
Judge, I don't have a problem with, if it's being used immediately right after an allegation, if there's an Amber Alert, if there's a
Sure.
robbery, if something of
Sure.
violence, and they're trying to, and I
Figure
get
out
that.
who's there.
And
or
I
where.
don't have a problem.
You're talking about going back and
I'm talking about the
yeah.
storing and I get it, and an expectation. I understand those arguments, but to allow an agency, it's almost like 1984, where Big Brother's just watching
Yeah.
all of us, and we're Nick and I. We've talked about this. I feel like this is just the starting point if we don't put some sort of regulation to it.
Yes, and that's probably the hard part, because
That's the
getting
hard part.
anybody to do that or to agree
Yeah.
is tough. Wasn't there a similar argument with the Ring cameras and the storage of information
Yes.
and the
Yeah.
cameras inside? Yeah.
See, you know technology.
No, I don't.
You
I
are
just-
underestimating how
no.
much you know.
No, I know enough to be like, nope, not me.
But see that.
But-
Imagine you're still at the AUSA's office
Yeah.
and you're dealing with all these
Sure.
nuances. It
Yeah.
gets pretty complicated.
It clearly, and the beauty of that too was they put a lot of emphasis on people who were excellent
Yeah.
in knowing the law, but maybe not in presenting a case. So in other words, they had some good researchers too. But yeah, you're right. It's important.
So this popped up, and this is not on our discussion, but you brought up flock cameras.
Okay.
Have you heard of flock condor?
What's
No.
that, like a new cereal or something?
Are those the ones that actually track people as they move? Like
There he
literally
is.
as they move.
That's
So
Brandon.
Flock, that's Brandon. Flock has the Flock cameras that read the license plates, but they have a different version of a camera. Imagine you're in a park and you're walking, and on a light pole, there's a camera up there, and
it
it's-
moves?
and it moves and it tracks you.
Oh,
That
wow.
that can be what's called a Flock condor, which tracks people.
I
Yeah.
did not know about that.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to get sued for that because I'm telling
But
you.
here you go
if
again.
I'm-
You're
if-
walking in a park.
Yeah,
Why do we have to normalize this?
I don't want to normalize.
This cannot be This cannot be, this cannot be the new norm.
I don't know how you stem that tide. I don't know.
I don't know,
Yeah,
but deep down it bothers me
that you're being watched.
that I'm being watched. I'm not doing anything illegal.
I got you.
Okay, I'm
I
not
got
doing
you.
anything illegal.
I got
But I think from a general sense of our society, and I get it, part of it is prevention, and I can appreciate that. But in the same token,
Or proof.
this is
Prevention
the
or proof.
greatest country on earth. The freedoms that we have, we celebrate them every year. But yes, we're also taking away
So
a
that's
lot
why
of
we
our
need people like
Constitution.
you
And
protecting
it
them and
just
bringing
really
those-
is
yeah.
disheartening to see that our politicians are allowing this technology to be a part of the government.
Don't give up.
Okay.
Don't
I'm
worry.
serious. Don't give up. That's the only thing I can keep saying.
Okay.
Don't give up.
Can we talk about her as a judge?
Oh,
I mean,
Go ahead.
sure. I mean,
Go ahead.
if we want to talk about that, so go ahead, Nick. I mean, you've had it on your topic list.
I got to say something.
Okay.
You know, we talked about this. Your role as a U.S. attorney and the service you've got to the community, which was fantastic. But you then, after you retired from the U.S. Attorney's Office, you served for a period of time.
13 years.
Well,
where?
you served for a period of time in Miamisburg as a magistrate judge.
Oh, I did from 12 to 14.
And
okay.
and then you.
That was a great experience too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judge Reddick.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Bob Reddick.
Bob Reddick,
Reddick.
and
God
now
rest his
his
soul.
daughter.
Yeah.
Yes, he was a wonderful man, and I think she's
Agree.
picking
Great.
up where he left off.
Agree
She's
to
a good
both.
person. Yeah.
Agree to both.
So you go into, you become a magistrate, then you run for the Oakwood Municipal Court
Right.
position, and you
Right.
win that position, and you hold it for 12 years.
Right.
And so Tony and I appear in front of a lot of judges, different judges all the time. And I got to say this to you. I think Tony would agree with me. We believe that in order to be a good judge, you have to have what's called a good judicial temperament. What's your what do you? I'm going to ask you this: the judicial temperament that you admire, that you would like to have. What would that be?
Calm,
Mm-hmm.
empathetic, listening, realizing that whatever it is, even if it's something small, which very often municipal courts, it's not their best day.
That's it.
There it is.
And I do. That's why I don't think in a making fun manner or anything. But when my phrase was "hope springs eternal," I think that phrase or that little admonition from Judge Rice. You know, Peg, if they do mess up, we'll get a chance to do it again and get, so that stuck with me. And what's the right thing to do? So I think maybe just. It's hard sometimes, the people that you see in any court, but clearly I've seen in municipal court that it's hard to imagine you in their life.
Yeah, of course.
You living that life. And I keep going back to how lucky I always was and still am. But I think trying to at least realize where they're coming from is a benefit,
I-
and to
I-
help. It's social work, and I say that with all respect.
Years and years ago, and I've told this story, and Tony knows it, when I went to a night court, old man Hensley, I say old man because his son was a
Yes,
judge.
exactly.
And he had mentioned, he said, use that same term to me that you just used, which, and he said it in this way. He said, Nick, in the municipal court, it's a court of the people.
Yeah.
It's a court which 90% of the people that come here are your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, people who have had a bad day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't get to Oakwood a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but when I did get to Oakwood, the one thing that stood out to me about you was that you took the time, you treated everybody as, and I say it like it should be normal. You treat everybody like a human being. I know, but that's
They
not
are.
everything. I know, but that's
Yeah.
not everything that we see when people go to court. But you know what?
That's too bad.
You
That really
you,
is.
you spent so much time on things like, let me help you get your license valid.
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah.
And I thought that you know, as you were doing in the U.S. Attorney's Office, your role as a judge doing that was tremendous. Nobody does that like you would do it.
I do know courts, I think, and I
Nobody
learned that.
like you.
Well, how hard would that be if I have trouble sometimes interpreting
Sure.
what they want, or you and I spoke before your program about trying to help somebody restoration of
Gun rights.
and just reading those statutes, how hard it must be for somebody who's just come out of prison or come out. How do I do it? I don't know. If you could just think, and driving, one thing goes bad, and you see a million people. I thought I'd paid it. I thought it lapsed, or I didn't know it lapsed. I didn't know, or I thought it went in, but to try and help them figure that out, our clerks, and they did in Miamisburg too, would print them an entire copy of what I said. Here's what the BMV has on you. Here's what you have to do. And I know there are people that try and help. It's just things that I think bog people down and make it, maybe like me in computers, bog people down and make living harder.
The one thing that we have in our justice system is that there's a universal law, right? The Ohio Revised Code. And every state has a code, right?
Sure.
Code set with traffic
Sure.
code section or criminal code section, and that's universal. And we know what the maximum penalties are that a court can impose on misdemeanors, and we know that the maximum fines. So that's all standard. What's not standard is unfortunately, and Nick talked about, and I couldn't agree with him more about how you've conducted court. But there's such an inconsistent. And Nick and I practice. If I ran the numbers of
You
how
are
many,
all over.
we are
I've
all
seen
over.
you in many jurisdictions.
All over. I
and
will
I
tell
get
you.
to say, let me interrupt you
Yes,
for
ma'am.
1 second.
Okay.
I tend to, I can't tell you how much I respect people who go all out for their client. I don't know how else to put it in a short version. But there are some attorneys who don't. You can tell there are some attorneys that sometimes don't show up. There are some.
Yeah.
But you two and some others are me looking back at 71, looking back on, you're still young, believe it or not. And the fact that you give your all for your clients is a huge thing. And
Thank you.
you have my respect and admiration.
Thank you.
Yeah, that
So
means a
now
lot.
we're
Thank
over
you.
that.
Nah, thank
Okay.
you. Thank
Okay,
you.
that's the truth.
You waited an hour to say that.
I'm sorry.
I don't understand.
I'm slow. This is not my forte.
You're supposed to gas us up at the
I'm
beginning.
I should have, yes. I'm sorry, Will.
I guess but thank you for that. I sincerely appreciate it. It means a lot coming from you. I think what's frustrating is going to different municipalities is that every judge treats the sentencing part, because most misdemeanor cases, the majority of them, right? Because there's so many of them, the majority of them get worked out.
Sure.
But the second part of the plea bargain is appearing in front of a judge and doing a sentencing part.
Right.
And everybody treats it differently. Some judges, where we would think, hey, this is a first-time offense. It's benign. He's had one bad day. It should be pretty simple. And then you can sense a judge looking at it differently, going, wait a minute, this is terrible. We need to put him on. You need to give him a few days in jail. We need to put him on probation. Why do you think there's such an inconsistency on how? And I get there's a human standard of it, but there's such an inconsistency. Again, we can drive 10 minutes and go to a different municipality,
Sure.
and it's a completely different treatment. We Nick and I are experienced enough where we know which jurisdiction, how the judges treat these certain cases. Some judges don't like theft cases. Some judges don't like multiple. I mean, there were judges that were giving jail sentences for driving under suspensions of defendants that have no financial means of even doing
Ever
it right.
paying. Right.
Why are we?
Right.
So again, I'm not asking you to tell me how everybody else thinks, but just do you have an opinion of that? Like, why are we
Sure.
so inconsistent on the bench?
Well, I think because it's different personalities and people who elect judges just because they look good, or any elected official. Oh, I know their name, or I had. I don't know what the right word is, but when I was allowed or asked to go sit in Trotwood,
Yeah.
it was one of the overall best legal experiences I've had. But that sounds awful because it came out of such tragedy, such legal tragedy, what happened. But it was wonderful. You asked me about that. They had a strong history of, you thieve from Lowe's or you thieve from
That's
here,
it.
you're going to jail. And I was like, well, there might be reasons that people do this, and maybe nope, this is what, this was the policy. So I think there's some thinking about, well, I wouldn't do that, so therefore, boom. But I do think, now there are some people, I have to say, that once they build up a record of that, where they go back and they make it, and you very nicely represented a gentleman out there.
I know I did.
I won't mention his name, but you did a great job for him. I took some heat for that. But I think you were meaning that wasn't my policy to
Yeah.
put everybody in jail.
Yeah.
But they do need something else. I see why it's a problem with a store. I see why, but it isn't the only problem. It isn't, it's
course.
one of many. So to try and work it out, maybe to have better probation officers that say, you're supposed to go to counseling. Here's why you did that. Here's
Yeah.
what. And in many cases, it isn't just money. There's a lot of factors. But I think one of the beautiful things is I like it when the prosecutor and the defense attorney talk, and on the plea form say, we have talked about this. The prosecutor may say, I'm not pushing for jail time, because my thought is they've had a chance, you all and the prosecutor, to look at things, to look at the bigger picture, and now you're giving me your professional opinion. And I might hang it over their head, so to speak, a phrase that's awful. But I think you're right. People have set ideas. You do this, you're getting that, and that's probably not a real. I don't want to do that.
You know what you just mentioned, Judge Rose would say that when we'd go in with the 11C1C agreement, he'll say something like, I remember in chambers, he'll say, you guys are two very competent lawyers, and you know your case better than I do. If you've agreed to a C1C, which is a stipulated agreement, unless there's something egregious about
Sure.
it, I'm going to follow it because
Probably,
I trust the work
Exactly.
that you've done.
But that's where it all comes in, what we talked about before, ethics and hard work you're pitching for your client. Yeah. So I think that's and especially at the municipal level. The
Yeah.
prosecutor can, many times has said, in both jurisdictions, Trotwood and Miamisburg, a different but my point is, they have said, the victim here hasn't come in, or the victim here really didn't want this to happen, but they needed the help of the police, and now there are reasons that can be articulated that make me think, just as you said, Judge Rose, you're two very professional people, and your opinion, while I have the final say, and I tell people that in any plea agreement,
Yeah.
that I'm going to take that to heart.
Let me ask you this. So I know Nick and I, we've talked about this before. In fact, Nick had a case, and I'm not going to mention the location, the case, or the judge. But how do you feel in situations where there's a stipulation between the county the prosecutor and the stipulation between the defense lawyer, and at the time of the plea, a judge would say, "We'll give a disclosure saying, I know you guys have agreed to this, but I'm not bound by it. And ultimately I'll decide at the time of sentencing whether I want to follow this agreement."
I say that because
I'm not saying you say that.
no, but I do say something to that.
Okay.
I'm very likely to, or I will
Okay.
take their recommendations and consider them heavily, but it's my decision ultimately, because I think that's only fair. That's what they have to know, and unless I see, hey, this is your fifth OVI and
Sure.
Something terrible, but I think people have a right to know that. So I do say something similar to that, not to scare somebody, but to put it on the record that that this could happen.
For the record, it does scare defendants, though.
But what would you have them say? That I will do this no matter what, or what would
Go
you
ahead.
seriously? What would you?
I think what I remember cases that I've had with Judge Rose. I think he says if I decide not to go with the agreement,
Right.
I think he usually puts a stipulation that he'll allow defendants to withdraw the
I
plea.
could say
and
that,
I'm
sure.
not saying that judges should
No,
do
no.
that, but I've always been under the school of thought. Yeah, ultimately, judges have the discretions to impose a sentence the way they want, and that's their job. That's their role in the court system. But I've always felt that if prosecutors and defense lawyer have sat down and they know their case and they've agreed and there's an agreement, I mean, unless there's something egregious, from a defense point of view, we have to sit with our clients and say, look, trust the system. We got you a
Right.
deal. Trust the system. I'm 85%,
Right.
maybe 87% with this judge that they're
Right.
going to follow it, and they're going to say, "Wait a minute, I'm believing you. I got a
Right.
plea, and I can't take that back." I think that makes the process again a little bit more disadvantaged.
It must be awful. Truly, I don't care
to
what.
go through this with the client.
Yeah.
It just makes it one
That's
more
what I
step.
say.
One
I
more
wasn't
step.
cut out to be a defense attorney, but I think you're right. I think you have to get on the record, and that came from way back, Judge Rice. You could say a plea may take an hour and a half, but nothing was ever overturned. He made sure people knew what they were doing. And I think that's very important, even in a small setting like municipal court. It's still people's money. It's still people's liberty. It's still people's record.
Yeah.
And I think they need to know that. But quite often, I've said just what you said. I very likely will, or I value your opinion, or lots of times I'll tell people your attorney and I go way back because we do. So I know they're good people.
Yeah,
I know
you've said that.
Well, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe I could soften it a little bit, but you're right. I could see why it's kind of like jumping off the boat. You get somewhere you got to make a move, and
Yeah.
that's got to be a tough one.
I think when Tony mentioned that situation, it's important to also know, you mentioned it, at a certain level, at a state level, you go into a court and the judge is ruling on 30 cases that day.
Sure.
And you've got lawyers and public defenders and prosecutors, and we know, for better or for worse, the way that the legal system currently is in place, in order to move cases, hey, by the way, the prosecutor and I have an agreement, here's where we are, and we rely on that, and the judge, and I think every judge is different, but the judge should say, you know what, I agree with you, I'm going to let that happen, or you know what, we're going from Jump Street and this is the way that it is. But I think it helps move cases along.
Sure.
Because then what happens is you say, you know what, Judge Quinn, we're going to trial. And then all of a sudden your staff calls and they say, are you really going to trial? Why are you going to trial? And then I say, why are you asking me? Why don't you ask the prosecutor? You know, why don't they make a better offer? Why is it always my fault
there.
when we've got to go to trial? It's not my fault.
No, and you can only do so much if
Yeah.
your client doesn't want to go to trial. But you have to. The reverse is also true.
Yeah.
There are some defendants who are horribly unrealistic. As an
Yes.
example, the
Oh,
guy
of
with
course.
the 3,
Of course.
where he thought he should be able to walk away with I don't know what, but your third OVI is a big deal.
I'm not discounting that.
So I think the reverse could be true. But you're right. You have to be able to present something to your client. So it's a balancing act again. They have to know
Yeah.
what they're jumping into. And
Judge, what are some of the biggest mistakes that some of the lawyers have practiced in front of you? What are some of the things that are going, I can't believe this is going on with this guy, or I feel bad for the defendant? What are some of the mistakes that the lawyers are doing in front of you?
well, I have one. I thought you were going to ask me that I made.
No, of course not.
You didn't make
I'm
it.
not
You
gonna-
never
I'm
made
not
it. You
gonna
I
never
did.
ask you
I
that
was trying so hard, and again, it was in Trotwood in the Western Division, and they see a huge volume of cases, and a lot of people who are hurting, just for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But they brought in one gentleman, and I was trying so hard to keep up. I had little sticky notes on all these things, and they're coming fast and furious, and people are in my ear. We do it this way. We do. And when I looked up, the gentleman, the defendant, had his hands resting on the podium. I thought he was.
Flipping.
Can
you
I
off.
say flipping me
Yeah,
off?
sure, of
Okay.
course.
I thought that's exactly what he was doing. And I lost it. I was like, I'm trying so hard to tell you what you're and are you flipping me off? Are you? And the deputy, who is
Oh, no.
wonderful,
Oh,
he's
I
just
know the
wonderful.
deputies.
He's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And he started chuckling a little bit. The officers that were waiting in the jury box started. The people in the and I looked, and he goes, oh no, sir. I mean, ma'am, no, sir. I only have these 2 fingers left. But my eyes were bad. I know it's terrible. And I thought, this is going to be one that I will remember till I die. He was a meth abuser, and he'd
God.
lost things. But it looked as though he was, I'm sorry, as though he was doing that. And I was just livid. I thought, I'm really trying here. and it kind of put things in perspective.
That's a great story.
Well, it was
And-
was a day I will not forget. But having said that, I think it's important to.
What are us lawyers though? What do we?
What do you guys do?
What are we
I think
missing
the
out on?
sad thing is when you can tell people haven't paid any attention, haven't talked to them,
Yeah.
have taken their money in cases where because they've heard something that isn't maybe accurate, or they've bought into, I don't even know some of the commercials anymore because I try not to watch stuff, but they buy into that, and good lawyering is not necessarily how much you rattle your saber. I think it's a court, a judge, a prosecutor knowing that what you tell them, your word. You're not going to, I don't mean embarrass the prosecutor or the judge, but one time as a prosecutor, I have had an attorney tell me that they wanted to resolve it, but they needed a postponement in the plea. And when she came back to court, she goes, no, the time's running, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And Judge Mers was livid. He wrote this long thing that said, you don't represent. And it wasn't, it was a deception is what I'm trying to
Yes,
explain. They
you're right.
purposely thought that because the time to indict, they were mistaken, but they purposely thought that. And he went nuts. And I was shocked that somebody, but I think you want a reputation for being above board. You don't have to tell me every last thing your client's done, but at least to know that you're representing them to the fullest, which, I mean it again, you do. You
Yeah.
clearly do. But you've also met with them and given them some thought. You're a realist. You're there to give them your opinion on what this judge or that judge might do. But one of the worst things, I think, is to see, especially when you know these people really aren't, they might be educated in the way of what they've been doing, but they're not necessarily wise in the ways of how a prosecution works. And I think it's sad sometimes. So.
Okay. Federal court We talk about mandatory minimums. We've
Yeah.
got big time penalties. In federal court, typically, when we talk about whether a person's going to remain incarcerated during the pendency of their case or if they're going to let them out, the court will set a bond in a case.
Sure.
And typically in a federal case, they either keep you locked up or they let you out. They don't make you post money anymore.
Okay.
We've got municipal court cases. Bail and bond seem to be a big issue because we're setting monetary amounts with people who, quite frankly, can't afford to pay it.
Right.
As a judge, how do you deal with that type of an issue?
I would like to know that, because sometimes what I see is, hey, the judge who had this before gave you an OR bond. You stood me up twice.
There you go.
Okay.
So you're not just not showing up. Well, I had, and the excuses are quite lame. And I said this, or maybe they're not to them. But,
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I say, why would I do that a third time or a fourth time? Because when you do that, you mess up everybody. The officer who had to be scheduled to come in, and I believe in Dayton, I don't know if they still do, but I believe you had to go through them to schedule a witness because they were worried about overtime and things. So there's a lot involved when you miss a court date.
But I think where I'm coming from is the very initial appearance that somebody has. And, a lot of courts will have a bond schedule. They'll say, oh.
They tried to do a uniform one
Yes.
with municipal court. I knew that.
I think they did.
Am I wrong if I say this? I believe that if it's a nonviolent offense,
Sure.
municipal, it's a misdemeanor. Am I wrong to say it's an own recognizance bond?
Not in my book, but I think I emphasize for people no further violations,
Sure.
no other activities,
Yeah.
no driving.
Right.
And if you do that, you'll be back, and
And I say that because coming back to Old Man Hensley, it's the people's court, right? 90% of our friends, family, neighbor,
That's right.
they've had a bad day.
Sure.
Hey, guess what? Just come back.
Sure.
If you don't come back,
Then
we're going to have a
talking.
different
Sure.
conversation.
And some of it is tough because a lot of what the municipal courts do, I think, is have to react to a domestic violence,
Sure.
have to react to a resisting, have to react to things like that. And it is tough to know. And if you look at someone's record and they have a violent prior convictions and they have things, I think maybe one school of thought is if there's a little bit of money in the game, they'll be inclined to walk the straight and narrow and come back. But you're right. A $500 bond to one of us may not. It still hurts in my
It
book,
still
but
hurts.
sure it does.
still
But
hurts.
to someone else, that's unattainable.
Right.
That's unattainable.
And they sit in jail.
Sure. Well, that's just not the way it ought to be. That's
Judge,
wrong.
after spending a lifetime,
I'm worried about what he's going to say.
I'm trying to. I don't. Okay, let me rephrase. Let me
Go
rephrase
ahead.
my final thought. You've dedicated yourself as a public servant to our legal system, both as a AUSA and a judge, and you've had a lot of contact with people. What have you learned from people in general?
I've learned about myself how all the way through lucky people can be if they just have somebody that gives a damn about them, whether it's a parent, a judge, whether it's a mentor, whether it's somebody that gives a damn can make a difference. I find that it kind of makes me feel better when I know I'm in a better position to help somebody, and it's not going to be that big a deal. Gun rights was just one little thing, helping them get their license. What am I supposed to do? More defendants have said, I can't pay for insurance and pay what I owe the BM fee.
Oh, yeah.
All those, what am I supposed to do? I thought it would be a good idea to volunteer at some of those clinics that they hold for people, because I think most people are trying hard, especially now, just to get by day to day.
Absolutely.
Working with what they have. And money is a bigger object for a lot of people. I mean, I always knew it was.
Unfortunately.
But a bigger object for a lot of people than maybe some people realize. And we're kind of all in it together. So if they're not doing well, I don't think any of us are doing well.
Oh, well said.
Amen.
Wow.
I go,
Do we end there? Do we have a
Oh,
few
yeah.
lightning round cases?
I do want to ask your favorite. I don't know. Are you a movie person?
it depends. As I
What-
said, my memory's faded. What kind of movies are we talking
What's your
about?
favorite legal movie? Because we did
Right
an
now?
episode.
You know- oh.
We did an episode where we just talked about like 4 or 5 different movies.
Yeah.
What's your favorite legal movie ever? Like all time?
What's the one where she gets up and talks about, the
My Cousin Vinny.
Yes.
Thank
Now
you.
That is a good one.
That-
I like old versions of Law and Order.
Okay.
I like those.
So your favorite
yeah.
show. Your
But-
favorite show. That's
well, that's
Law
a
and
show.
Order.
But
Gotcha.
another one that I like currently, because I do wake up in the middle of the night, is Forensic Files. I know everybody's like,
Oh,
my-"
boy.
Okay,
I know.
okay.
I know. But
There
no,
it is.
no. It shows you how they resolve it. But My Cousin Vinny was a favorite
Yeah.
of mine. I don't know why. It's kind of silly, but I
No,
liked
it is.
I liked it.
I can watch that any time
Yeah.
of the day. It is absolutely my favorite. I've done videos on
Yeah.
this plenty
Yeah.
of time. I can watch
What was
that.
the other movie where I'm not? It might have been Matthew McConaughey. He's not
Lincoln
Lincoln
Lawyer.
Lawyer, or
Was-
he's driving around the
that,
car.
Well, that was a good one too. I
Time
thought.
to
Lincoln
Kill.
Oh, are you
Lawyer.
thinking of the old John Grisham movies?
Yes, and
it's
I
Time to
had
Kill.
read that book, but the last line is, "Now imagine." He runs the jury through, and he goes, "Now imagine that the defendant is white," and you're like, to show
Yeah.
the disparity. And you think this man loves his daughter, this man defended his daughter, this man, and I thought, wow, that was a power. So I think maybe more the line than the movie.
Yeah.
I like
That is a great one.
Yeah, My Cousin Vinny's
That-
probably it. Not
but
really
that was-
profound, but good.
No. Look, first of all, thanks for indulging 2 knuckleheads and Brandon.
I think you guys
today.
are wonderful. I mean that.
We appreciate your time. We appreciate your service. If our listeners are still listening, please click the subscribe, follow button, and ask any questions. Judge Quinn, thank you.
Thank you
Back
so
at
much.
it.
Thank you, Judge Quinn.
I appreciate what you all do. No
Appreciate
kidding.
it.
Thank you.